My lazy teammate expected me to do all the work, grinning. Just put my name on the project, you're good at this. When I refused, he ran to the boss, lying. She's not a team player. At the presentation, the boss looked at my solo report, then at him, and said, "Funny, because you're not on the team anymore." He turned white as his access badge deactivated. Let me tell you how one lazy guy at work tried to coast on my back, lied straight to the boss, and thought he was going to get away with it. He didn't. This happened a few years ago when I was working as a senior analyst at a mid-sized software company in downtown Seattle. I'd been with the company for almost 5 years at that point. I wasn't the loudest or flashiest person in the room, but I got things done. I liked solving problems and building clean solutions. I wasn't interested in office drama, but unfortunately, drama found me anyway. Our department ran a quarterly innovation program. It was a pretty big deal. Each quarter, small internal teams would pitch ideas that could improve the company, new tools, processes, or features. If the project was accepted by the board, it would go into development, and the team behind it would get a nice bonus and recognition across the company. I'd won that award twice before. My ideas were solid, and I could build and present well. That made me a bit of a target. Now, here comes the problem. His name? Bradley. If you've ever worked in an office, you already know the type. Bradley was slick. Always joking, always had something clever to say, always talking his way out of work. He was one of those people who knew just enough buzzwords to sound smart and managed to charm his way into promotions without really doing anything. He wore expensive watches and showed up to work with creative energy, but no results. Everyone knew he didn't do much, but no one ever called him out. The guy was Teflon, nothing ever stuck. Our boss, Mr. Dalton, was a soft-spoken man near retirement. Nice guy, but not exactly a firecracker. His management style was basically, if I don't hear complaints, things are fine. So naturally, people like Bradley slipped through. Anyway, when it was time to assign teams for that quarter's innovation project, Dalton decided to mix things up. He paired people with different skill sets to try and promote collaboration. That's how I ended up with Bradley as my project partner. I remember sitting across from him in the meeting room when he got the news. He leaned back, grinned, and said the words that started all of this. "You're good at this stuff. Just put my name on it when it's done." No joke. That's what he said. No offer to help. No discussion about ideas. Just smiled like he was doing me a favor. I didn't even respond. I just stared at him. Then I said something like, "We're supposed to be working together." He shrugged. "Sure. I mean, I'll give feedback or whatever. But I trust you. I know you'll make it great." He left the meeting with a coffee in one hand and his phone in the other. I hoped maybe he was just joking. Maybe he'd actually do something once we got going. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Big mistake. I set up a shared Google Drive folder, added Bradley, and sent an outline with task assignments. I created a doc for brainstorming and scheduled 2 working sessions. He didn't show up to either session. I messaged him on Slack after the first one. No reply. I sent a calendar reminder for the second one. He declined it. No explanation. By the end of the week, I'd written 75% of the brainstorm document myself. Still no input from him. I started drafting the proposal. I'd already done some light user research on a new internal tool idea and wanted to present the early findings. I messaged him again. "Hey, I'm moving forward on the idea we discussed. Can you gather some usage metrics from the dev team like we planned?" His response, 2 days later. "Can't this week, too slammed. But sounds great. Keep me posted." Didn't offer a new time. Didn't do the task. I pinged again 2 days after that. No answer. I bumped into him in the hallway later that week and said we needed to talk about deliverables. He laughed and said, "I've got a lot going on, but you're killing it. You got this." That was the second time he'd said, "You got this." I was starting to see the pattern. I realized I was alone in this. I'd been trying to share the workload, but it was clear he was happy to let me do everything. I stopped messaging him. At that point, I had a working prototype, user interviews logged, a business case drafted, and had started building a slide deck. I was pouring my time and energy into making this a great pitch. Meanwhile, Bradley? Radio silence. But what really got me was this. One afternoon, I passed by a meeting room and saw Bradley presenting something to Dalton. He was animated, talking with his hands, and I saw my prototype on the screen. He didn't see me. I kept walking. That's when it hit me. He was planning to take credit. We were 2 days from the final presentation to the board. I sent the complete project files to Mr. Dalton and CC'd Bradley. In the body of the email, I wrote, "This is the final project file. All research, writing, design, and development were completed by me. Bradley did not participate or contribute beyond initial discussion. Please let me know if you need any supporting materials." Less than 10 minutes later, a reply from Bradley hit my inbox. This is absolutely false. I was shut out of the process from the start. She refused to collaborate and dismissed my input. She even said I was slowing her down. I'm disappointed and honestly a little hurt. This is not how teams are supposed to work. My hands went cold. He wasn't just ignoring the project. He was flipping it. He was accusing me of being the problem. And he CC'd everyone. I'm not a drama starter, but I'm also not stupid. From day one, I had saved everything. Every Slack message, every calendar invite, screenshots of missed meetings, email threads, timestamps on the Google Docs showing I was the only one editing notes from our one hallway conversation where he said, "You got this." I'd typed them into a personal doc after we spoke, just in case. I compiled it all into a folder titled Documentation, Q3 Project Participation. Then I sent a reply to Dalton only. Please see attached folder showing all communications, contributions, and timeline of events. I'm happy to discuss further, but I'd rather let the facts speak. I didn't include any emotion. No opinion. Just facts. That's where we are now. Tomorrow is the big pitch. Dalton hasn't replied yet. Bradley has been quiet since his last email. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I've got a feeling things are about to get very real. And I'll update once the meeting's over. Let's just say, I'm not putting anyone's name on this but mine. Bradley had thrown me under the bus, lying in front of our boss and a few directors over email. I'd replied with hard proof, logs, dates, missed meetings, and a full paper trail that showed exactly how much, or how little, he contributed. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was nervous about the project itself. I knew my work was solid. But the idea that someone could lie so boldly, so confidently, and that people might actually believe it, got under my skin. Morning came fast. I put on my best blazer, packed my laptop, printed 2 copies of the final report just in case, and walked into the office like I was headed to court. I got to the conference room 10 minutes early. It was one of the bigger rooms on the 14th floor. Big table, glass walls, a wall-mounted screen. Inside, Dalton was already seated. He didn't smile when I walked in, just nodded. I said good morning. He nodded again. Awkward. Then, 2 minutes later, Bradley walked in late, of course. He was wearing a suit. First time I'd ever seen him in one. He had that same fake smile on his face, like nothing was wrong. He walked in like he owned the place. Pulled out a chair directly across from me, sat down, and leaned back casually. He looked at me and said, loud enough for Dalton to hear, "Let's just keep it professional, all right?" I blinked. I always do. He smiled again. Sure. Dalton didn't say a word. Just kept looking at his tablet. Then Bradley leaned forward and said, "Listen, you can still change the file. Add my name. Make it easy on both of us." I stared at him. He actually had the nerve. The board members filed in 5 of them. Some had been around for years. A few I barely knew. These were people who mattered. If your project got their attention, it went straight to the top. One of them, a woman named Ms. Ruiz, smiled warmly at me and said, "Looking forward to your pitch. We've heard good things." I nodded. "Thank you." Bradley chuckled. "We appreciate the opportunity." I didn't respond. Dalton stood up, cleared his throat, and began. Today's pitch is from Team 3, Bradley and me. We'll begin with a brief intro, then move into the prototype and proposal. He looked directly at me. Go ahead. I stood, plugged in my laptop, and started the presentation. 5 minutes in, just as I was explaining user feedback from interviews I'd run, something strange happened. Bradley interrupted me. "Actually," he said, "this part was something I handled, so I'll take over for a moment." I turned to look at him. So did everyone else. Dalton raised an eyebrow. Bradley stood up and walked to the screen like he knew what he was doing. He clicked through the slides, my slides, and started talking. He said, "We focused on internal workflows and found that most delays came from the handoff stage. So I cut in. No, I ran those interviews. You weren't present." He paused. His smile flickered, then came back stronger. "We discussed the questions together, though. A mess." Ruiz looked confused. Dalton's face was stone. Bradley kept going like nothing had happened. He was paraphrasing my words badly, getting details wrong, calling features by the wrong names. At one point, he called the main feature the wrong acronym, an acronym I'd invented. I stood there silently, burning up inside. Then something happened that I didn't expect. "Excuse me," she said, holding up her hand. Bradley stopped mid-sentence. Ruiz turned to me. "Did you both work on this? Because it sounds like there's a disconnect." I didn't want to come off emotional, but I also wasn't going to lie. I took a breath. I built the prototype. I ran the interviews. I compiled the data. I created the deck. I wrote the report. Everything you've seen so far is mine. Bradley was assigned to the team, but he never contributed. Bradley jumped in louder. That's not true. We collaborated. Then Ms. Ruiz asked a simple question. Bradley, what tool did you use to build the prototype? Silence. She repeated it. Which tool did you use to build the prototype? He opened his mouth, closed it, then said, we used a Figma. Wrong. We used a custom in-house. Bradley was assigned to be my teammate on a high-stakes innovation project. He told me to just put his name on it, ghosted every meeting, did nothing, then lied to our boss claiming I shut him out. I documented everything and submitted it to our boss, Mr. Dalton. At the pitch meeting, Bradley tried to hijack my presentation, failed hard when asked to explain basic details, and finally stormed out after getting called out by a board member. Now let me tell you what happened after he walked out. Dalton had just said, let's take 5, after Bradley exploded and left. But no one actually left the room. Ms. Ruiz, head of strategy, leaned forward and whispered something to one of the other board members. Another exec, Mr. Lai, pulled out his phone and started typing furiously. Dalton walked to the far corner and started making a call. He spoke in a low voice, but I caught a few words. Yeah, it's about Bradley. No, not anymore. Yeah, pull it. I didn't know what pull it meant at the time. I'd find out soon. 3 minutes into the break, HR walks in. Yes, HR, full suit, clipboard, company badge on a lanyard. Her name was Monica. I'd seen her around but never spoken to her. She walked in like she had a mission. She quietly pulled Dalton aside, and they stepped into the hallway. Everyone in the room went silent. I sat there pretending to check my laptop, but I was listening as hard as I could. I heard Monica say, there's been a complaint about intimidation and exclusion. He filed it yesterday. Dalton said, he's covering his tracks. The timeline doesn't hold up. Monica sighed. We'll look into it, but we've already reviewed the file OP sent. It's detailed. Then, the one word that sent a chill down my spine, still, there's an open complaint. We need to pause all recognition and bonuses related to this project until it's resolved. Wait, what? That's when I realized the full plan. Bradley knew the presentation was coming. He knew he hadn't contributed. So the day before the meeting, he filed a complaint with HR accusing me of excluding him, mocking his ideas, and fostering a hostile work environment. That's why he felt so confident walking into the room. He was building a defense. If the project succeeded, he'd claim I pushed him out and tried to steal the spotlight. If the project failed, he'd blame me. And the worst part? Now, HR had to treat it seriously. Until it was investigated, they were freezing everything, the bonus, the project credit, the board decision. So after weeks of carrying that project on my back, after doing everything, I was suddenly in limbo, because of a lie. About 15 minutes later, everyone filed back into the room. Dalton looked tired. I could tell he wasn't happy. He cleared his throat. We're going to pause the current pitch and reconvene this afternoon. There have been developments. I nodded, not saying anything. Ruiz spoke up. I'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting with just OP and the board. I want to walk through the full scope of work without any distractions. Everyone agreed. Bradley wasn't invited. This was hours later, while I was sitting in the break room. I got an email from someone in IT, Jamal, a guy I used to share a desk pod with before the office redesign. Nice guy, super into gaming. The subject line, heads up, something weird in the logs. I opened it. Hey, not sure if this matters, but just flagging this in case. I looked at the shared folder for your project. Bradley accessed the Google Doc several times in incognito mode. Weird thing is, he copied sections of your text into a separate private file on his personal account. This is against policy, so we're reporting it upstairs. Just thought you should know. He'd copied my work into a separate file. Now I understood everything. That's how he thought he could speak during the pitch. He read my notes and tried to memorize parts. He thought that was enough to pass us involved. What a snake. This part is going to sound weird, but it's real. Right after the IT email, I got a Slack message from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Melissa. She used to work in our department, but transferred to another office after clashing with someone on a different team. Quiet, smart, super detailed. She left so quietly, most people didn't notice. Her message, I heard what's happening. Be careful. He did the same thing to me. I replied instantly, Bradley. She sent back, yes. He made me look like I was hostile. Took credit for my work. I didn't document things like you did. He played victim and I got pushed out. My blood went cold. This wasn't just laziness. Bradley had done this before. And now he was trying it again with better planning. I haven't even gotten to the second meeting yet. That's coming next. But just know, I'm not backing down. I don't care how smooth he talks. I don't care what complaint he filed. I've got the truth. And this time, I've got people watching. I worked my butt off on a major internal project. My assigned teammate, Bradley, did nothing, told me to just put his name on it, then filed a complaint against me when I refused. He even tried to hijack the presentation. Got caught lying. Still, HR paused everything because of his complaint. He thought he was clever. But the truth has a way of catching up. This is how it all ended. I got called back into the conference room that afternoon. This time, it was just me, the 5 board members, and Dalton. Bradley was not in the building. HR had asked him to stay home pending review. I walked in and sat down. The room was quiet. Serious. Ruiz started the meeting. Thank you for returning, OP. We've reviewed the materials you provided. We've also spoken to IT and other staff. She took a deep breath. Before we ask more questions, we want to give you a chance. Is there anything else you'd like to say? I nodded. Then I laid it all out. I told them everything. How I asked Bradley to join meetings. How he ignored me. How he said, just put my name on it. How I saw him showing my work to Dalton like it was his. How he tried to present my slides like he knew what he was talking about. I kept my voice steady. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just laid it all out with a quiet sort of anger I didn't know I had in me. Then I added one more thing. Melissa. From our department, last year. He did the same thing to her. Ruiz's eyes narrowed. She made a note. We're already reaching out to confirm that. Then she asked, and if we told you that Bradley filed the HR complaint before you even submitted the final project, would that surprise you? I shook my head. No. He planned this. Silence. Then Mr. Lai, another board member, said, IT flagged that Bradley copied your entire project into a private file under his personal email. He shared it with no one. That's a direct violation of company data policy. My heart jumped. So they saw it. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Dalton stood up. There's more. He opened a file folder on the table and slid out a printed email chain. This is between Bradley and an outside recruiter. He used parts of your project and claimed it as his own work. He sent it as a portfolio sample. Ruiz added, the recruiter forwarded it to us because something seemed off. Your name was still in the footer of one of the slides. He tried to use my work to get another job. That was it. That was the real goal all along. He wanted to slap his name on something great, present it, then walk away with a better offer. Probably hoped to leave before HR figured anything out. 10 minutes later, Dalton asked me to stay in the room. A few minutes later, the door opened. Bradley walked in. They brought him back for one final review, face to face. Apparently HR wanted to observe his response. He walked in like nothing was wrong. Until he saw my face. His smile dropped. Then he saw the printouts on the table. The ones with his email and the recruiter info. He sat down slowly. Ruiz didn't waste time. Bradley, did you create a duplicate file of the project and send it to an outside recruiter? He shifted in his seat. I mean, yes, but that's just how the industry works. Everyone does that. Lai spoke next. Did you contribute to this project? Bradley glanced at me. I gave input. She didn't want to work with me. Ruiz stared at him for a long time. What tool did she use to build the dashboard prototype? He blinked. Figma. Wrong again. And what does our SAT stand for? That was the custom feature I named Role-Specific Access Tracker. He said, real. Systems and analytics tech? There was a pause. And then, finally, Dalton looked at him and said, you're not on the team anymore. Bradley's face twisted. This is a joke. You're believing her over me? After all the work I've done here. Ruiz said, flatly, you did nothing. Bradley turned to me. You're not better than me. You just knew how to cover your tracks. I stared at him. No. I just did the work. He stood up fast, knocking his chair back. This whole company is toxic. No wonder people leave. He stormed toward the door. Then something happened I'll never forget. As he swiped his badge to leave, it flashed red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. He stared at it. Dalton said, it's already been deactivated. Bradley didn't say another word. Just walked out. Quietly this time. The room was silent. Monica from HR stood up. We'll finalize everything. Bradley's contract will be terminated by end of day. The project ownership will be formally credited to OP. The HR complaint is closed. Ruiz stood next. I want this project presented to the board next quarter. Officially. You've done outstanding work. I nodded. I didn't know what to say. Dalton walked me out. We didn't speak until we reached the elevator. Then he said, I owe you an apology. I should have seen it sooner. I didn't say anything. Just nodded. He added, good work. And not just on the project. Emails came in. Quiet ones. Some from people I barely knew. He tried that with me too. I'm glad you said something. You deserved better. Melissa messaged again too. You did what I couldn't. Thank you. There's a weird mix of emotions after something like this. I was relieved, yes. But also tired. Angry. Sad, even. I'd liked this company. I trusted the process. I believed hard work would always speak for itself. Turns out it doesn't, unless you make sure it does. People like Bradley? They don't stop until someone stops them. And even then, they don't really learn. They just move on to the next place. The next target. I don't hate him. But I don't forgive him either. He made me feel small. He made me question my own reality. That's a hard thing to come back from. But I did. I stood my ground. I told the truth. And for once, people listened.